My name is LaToya Willis. I'm going to share with you guys the things I've went through dealing with rape, homelessness, my health, losing my parents, and also my deafness. My mother was a young mom. My memory of homelessness with her started at around 3. So a lot of the times we stayed in shelters. We stayed in abandoned buildings. My mother was a regular mom. She received food stamps for assistance. However, my mother had emotional things that she went through. She wasn't stable emotionally, and I would also think mentally. I remember this one time we lived in this abandoned building. She basically talked to the landlord and he gave her an amount of $50 a month to live in this abandoned building, and it was better than living on the streets. But the thing of it is, it had no electricity, no running water. There was no heat. My mother eventually found a way to have water. This house, the very top floor was just open. There was a huge hole in the roof. But going to the second level, there was a hole. And so we were on the first level above the basement. And so we literally can lay on the floor inside of our apartment and look straight up, and we could see the stars. We could see everything at night, or it would rain in on us, or it would snow in on us. The home was dirty. We found a car seat that my youngest brother slept in. And then we found the box spring that me and my oldest brother, we laid on that. And of course it wasn't soft as the box spring, but it was better than laying on the floor. She did get the gas on eventually. So at that time, we were able to be a little bit warmer, but that's because she had met a guy. And this guy was abusive, but he was resourceful. So he was able to steal furniture from my mother. She was able to get a bedroom set because they were breaking into empty homes, so when they knew people were not there, and take things and bring them over to our house. He also helped find food. We had a friend that lived next door, and she invited me upstairs to play with her, and we were in her room playing, and I loved her room. It was decorated with pink and purple, and she had this huge dollhouse. My friend said my mom and my grandmother told us that you're poor. I was confused. I had never heard that word before. Even though we were homeless, we didn't bathe regularly, we did not have food regularly, any of those things. But she said that my grandmother and my mom said you were poor, and I asked her, well, what does that mean? She said, because you're dirty and you have a hole in your roof and you can see right into your house. And I was embarrassed. That's the first time I felt shame. That's the first time I felt like not worthy. At one point prior to this apartment that we were in, maybe not even 6 months before, my mother actually had a stable place to live. She had an apartment that my aunt helped her get, my uncle, and we were actually being threatened to be taken away by CPS workers. And so they gave my mother 3 days to literally find a place and be stable, unless we were going to be in foster care. And my mother did it with my help of my aunt. And so what we ended up doing was moving into this apartment, and they actually found more wood in the alley. They put together a chair. My mother already had bunk beds that she had just purchased from someone. My uncle made a table for us. My aunt brought a refrigerator in from her apartment, and her furniture moved it in. So when the social worker came back the very next day, she didn't give my mom 3 days, we had a place. So one evening, we were asleep. We were laying on the couch watching Oprah, and next thing you know, I smelled smoke. And there's smoke coming from the bottom of the door, and it was heavy, and I heard like drums or some type of alarm, and I panicked. I didn't know what it was, and I woke my mom, and I said, Mom, there's smoke coming from underneath the door. And we immediately had to get out of the house. Smoke filled it quickly, and what ended up happening was my landlord that lived in the downstairs, something happened in their unit, and it caught fire, and the whole building caught flames. And so the fire department was called. It was cold outside. We were outside with no shoes on in the snow. After that, we were homeless. We were misplaced because it wasn't livable. And that's how we ended up in the abandoned building. I was 7 years old. My life took a drastic turn from that moment. The guy that my mom was dating at the time when we were in an abandoned building, his mother had an empty space in the attic that we could share with another lady who was also misplaced, but this lady was promiscuous. She would have men in and out, and so we saw a lot of things in the shelter. She basically was having them come to service them. One night, my mom told me that I was going to go to my uncle's house for 2 weeks to stay for the summer. So I went over there, but I got a call just a few days later telling me that I had to go and pack my clothes. And I didn't know what was going on. And I was 8. I just turned 8. So I see that my uncle's daughter's mom is crying. Like, tears are crying. I said something's not right. And I had a feeling in the pit of my stomach something was terribly wrong. My uncle came and my aunt and my brothers to pick us up. I got in the car and they said, we're moving somewhere new. And I said, oh, okay, well, where's Mom? And my brother said, you'll see. And I knew then that something was terribly wrong. We get to my grandmother's apartment and we get upstairs. And everybody's looking sad, like something's wrong. And my brother just came out and just said, Mama dead. And my girl crashed. Because she was my best friend. We had been through so much together with struggles, homelessness, starvation. She was my protector when I was violated. And I didn't know how I could function in this world without her. And so that was my first time I tried to attempt suicide. I was 8 years old and I tried to split my wrist. It didn't work. My grandmother came in there and got me and told me it was going to be okay. And she prayed with me. And my grandmother introduced me to church. But from that moment on, my 2 brothers, we all 3 of us lived with my grandmother. And during that time, I learned independence. I learned how to cook. We were clean every day. We had food every day. When I was 10, I was at school and my grandmother came to the school to pick me up. And she had told me that my grandmother was sick, but that she was in a hospital, and I knew that wasn't true. I got my things. I went with my grandmother. We got to the house, and then they told us that my grandmother had died of a heart attack. I moved to Texas in 1990. I was 11. Life was different. It was me and my aunt and her daughter. We had a downstairs neighbor who would come up and do barbecues with my aunt. Like, they were socialized. We all lived in the same apartment complex. And one day, I got off the school bus. We had taken school pictures. And I remember, like, so excited because I was like, oh, I got these pictures. And I actually thought they was kind of cute. I don't even know where they are now, but I was happy about them. And he saw me get off the school bus. And he was like, what do you have? And I was like, oh, my school pictures. And I showed him the pictures. And he was like, oh, those are so nice. You look beautiful. And I said, thank you. So I walked home and I was so tired. I remember it was just a long day. And I was thinking to myself, I'm going to just take a nap in my aunt's bed because she was at work. So I laid in her bed for a little bit. And while sleeping, I was awakened by pressure on me. He was on top of me and he covered my mouth. And he told me to be quiet and not to say a word, but I was crying. I was hysterical. And he had his hand over my mouth and he pulled my clothes down with his other hand forcefully, and he raped me. He penetrated me in my aunt's bed. I was devastated, and I just felt like I wanted to die. It was painful. And when he was done, he just got up and he left like it was nothing. You know, he just left out of the house. And I was disgusted. I could smell him. I was terrified. I called my aunt. My aunt called the police and she told me she was on her way home. I was ashamed because it was in her bed. So then my aunt, I had to go with them to the police station. They took the sheets off the bed for evidence. They did a rape kit and then believed that was just enough evidence. I was only 13 and he went to prison. I never saw him again. So throughout my whole life, starting at 5 years old, I had been raped twice in one night. Molested at 6 by another man, molested again at 9, and then I was raped every day from 10 to 12, and then by that same offender, off and on again until I was 16, and then I had my last rape at 17, and all of those things robbed me of my identity. It robbed me of my confidence. I have had a total of 12 suicidal attempts in my life. Thank God they weren't successful. So I began my journey of healing at 33 and I'm 44 and I'm still working on it. It's a lifetime journey because of all the pain I've gone through at that time. And that's just the abuse physically, well, not physical abuse, but sexual abuse and the emotional abuse and mental abuse. Just so I can make it clear, I was even told at one time that my mother and my grandmother died, took it away from me. And so it was okay for what my abuser was doing to me at 10. Like, it was okay. They died to get away from me. And I thought it was true because that was my reality. My mom had died. My grandmother had died. And so obviously they hated me. Obviously I did something to make them leave. And so I held on to that for decades. And I finally was able to release that when I started to do the work. And it's work. You have to seek help. You have to talk to a therapist. I now have 2 beautiful girls. They're both adults now. And I'm also a grandmother. I have a 6-year-old grandson. And they are my life. And I would not be here today had God not given me the strength and the courage to keep pressing forward to overcome that. So in 2018, I discovered I was sick. I ended up with autoimmune diseases, several of them. I ended up with rare conditions, and my life just became a battle. I was in and out of the hospital for so many years. In 2020, I had to have emergency brain surgery because one of my rare conditions, called IIH, idiopathic intracranial hypertension, I developed excessive spinal fluid and it crushes your brain, literally. And I woke up one morning and I couldn't walk. I could barely lift my head. It was so heavy and I didn't know what was happening to me. I thought I was like when I died. So I went into the hospital. They kept me. And after doing a lot of tests, they told me that I may not make it through the night and I need to call my family. My aunt came with me later and she was there with me. And we was talking to the doctors and they was telling her and myself that I was going to go to a rehab facility to learn how to walk again because I couldn't stand. I couldn't keep my balance. And so at that time, they discharged me from the hospital, but I had saw a neurologist in the hospital and he notified us that I needed to see a neurosurgeon. And when we went to meet with him, it was on a Wednesday. And he said, you need to have emergency brain surgery to save your life. And we had a VP shunt placed into my brain to help pump out the fluid, but it was an emergency situation. It wasn't optional. I had no choice. I wasn't prepped about what this meant, how life would be, all of that stuff. So I had to learn as I went. That was November 20th of 2020. And a month later, December 31st, New Year's Eve, I woke up completely deaf and I panicked. I became extremely suicidal for the next 3 months. But every single morning I woke up, God would play in my head the moment I opened my eyes, before I could even scratch, stretch, whatever, that this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. And it played over and over again 7 times every morning until I was able to get out of bed without feeling suicidal. And then finally I woke up one day with this strength, this renewed energy, knowing that I was going to be able to survive. And I did. So this journey of deafness really truly made me strong because I had to go through that process all over again. Because I thought I knew who I was. LaToya, the girl that overcame all of these things. Now all of a sudden here I am, I'm deaf. And I got to find out who I am in this season, in this moment. And so at that time, my relationship with God grew tremendously and my passion for people grew even greater. So I decided I needed to help other people who are dealing with disabilities, who've been sexually abused, who've been in whatever situation, suicidal thoughts, all of those things. Like they have a voice, like I have a voice. And so because I found my voice, I just feel like it's my mission to help others find theirs. And so I started doing counseling sessions. Most of the times I counsel people for free because I'm thinking about where they are, but it became like a breath of fresh air. Like the burden of the pain from the past was lifted off of me because I was now walking in purpose. And the counseling sessions are confidential, of course, but I'm able to relate to them and their pain and where they are. And God gives me the tools to connect and help. And I'm writing books right now as well to also help people. So I'm hoping, even if it's just one person that hears what I've gone through and physically see me still here, to know that they can do the same thing. Nothing is too hard for God. Nothing. This deafness journey has been great. It is coming back. I can't say that. I am hearing a little bit more. Before I couldn't hear my own voice as much. Now I can hear it. I can far away, throwaway moment. It feels like, so I can hear like the tires on the road. I can hear like when doors close. So I became deaf because of an autoimmune disease, and it's a rare condition called VKH. But it basically is an autoimmune disease that takes away your hearing, it takes away your vision, and it also causes skin pigmentation where you lose your skin pigmentation. A lot of people, it is associated with like vitiligo, but it is a rare thing. It's a genetic disposition. And if my hearing comes back fully, that's still okay. If I'm deaf, that's still okay. Like, I'm happy where I am. My advice to other survivors is to first stop blaming yourself. The fact that you survived the trauma lets you know that you are a survivor and you can do this.